The PRovoke Podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.
Hello and welcome to a video version of the PRovoke Media Podcast. We're sure to have a very lively discussion today about a subject that is commanding a lot of attention, and that is Gen Z. And we're going to discuss Gen Z and their effects on the workplace. So we have three people participating today. We have Kathy Bloomgarden, who is CEO of Reuterfin and a partner in this endeavor. So welcome, Kathy. Gretel Perera is head of Expedia Brand PR for the Americas. Welcome, Gretel. And Josh Morton is head of corporate communications for Nestlé North America, which is the food giant's largest market. So hello to one and all. Hello.
Thanks, Anna.
Nice to see you. I appreciate it. You know, I was preparing a little bit, going through some of our notes and our readings, and I came across one of the sort of taglines we used for this, or a title for this, and it was about Gen Z, and the quote is "the end of the workforce as we know it," which is quite a dramatic statement, right? So I'm wondering what it is about Gen Z that is still very young. Some of them are still 10, 12 years old, that has the power and the influence moving forward to change the workforce as we know it.
Okay, well, I'll just start off and then throw it over to Josh and Gretel. I think that what we're seeing, first of all, is this, huge influx into the workforce. So within about 2 years, Gen Z is going to be about 27% of the workforce. I don't know if we really took note of that and realized it. And in addition, about just over half of Gen Z is actually diverse, considers themselves diverse. So that's also a very, very significant change. And 80% of Gen Z says they want to work for a company that shares their values. So all of a sudden, we're starting from something that looks quite different from earlier cohorts. And as we sort of think, all of us, about getting back to the office, what it means, the kind of culture that we can, put together and engage people with, we have to take into consideration the fact that Gen Z looks quite different. It was a great comment in the Wall Street Journal recently where they said, all this like 2 days, 1 day, 3 days, Monday, and Friday at home, or maybe Tuesday and Thursday in the office. It sounds more like gibberish than gospel. And of course, having Elon Musk throw, water on the fire by saying everyone's got to be back 40 hours, or I will consider you're fired. So I think, utter confusion, chaos. So how do we stop and kind of think about Gen Z in the context of all these other decisions and the kinds of flexibility that we need to put in place in order to make it attractive actually for the Gen Z population. I know that from my conversations with Josh and Gretel, they've really already been doing a lot of pilots and experimentation and programs that actually have shown outcomes and success. And Josh, maybe I turn to you just, and I would love your comment the other day about how you were creating, sort of a kind of independence and opportunity within a big company such as Nestlé, and what that looked like.
Sure. I think, one thing that we have to recognize about Gen Z is their desire to be entrepreneurs. And that goes from, they're starting their own startups and their own businesses, even some of them when they're in high school and college, to being as part of the workforce. And that entrepreneurial spirit really is something that they want to carry even into a large organization. And so something that we've done at Nestlé, two things, one on the product side and one on kind of the career development side. We have, from a product development standpoint, a program called Open Channel, which is total open sourcing, crowdsourcing initiative of new products. So anybody from anywhere at any level can take part in one of these challenges, and they actually become a founder. If they win. It's a little Shark Tank-esque. They go and they pitch a product in front of the executives, and they have the funding and they have the ability to work with a cross-functional team and really exercise those entrepreneurial muscles within the business specifically that has the resources of a company like Nestlé. The other thing from a career development perspective, what we talk about is it's not the corporate ladder, it's more like a rock wall. And the ability to climb up and do different things along the way really contribute to a really successful and productive career. And so we have a program called Talent Marketplace that was actually started by one of our employees that allows people to post. It's like an internal jobs board, but not for kind of formal jobs, but more for things that people may want to develop skills at. If you want to get into a career in R&D, you can actually try that out by going on a little bit of like a mission assignment. So we found that those things really help motivate employees at all levels, but particularly for Gen Z.
I think it's super important, I mean, what Josh is saying, because about 62% of people are saying they'd, in this cohort are saying they'd rather have a startup, have their own business, and leave big companies. And so what you've done really effectively is create that possible environment and made it even more attractive than your own startup, because you can develop skills, you can like rock, climb the, what'd you say, climb the rocks?
The rock wall.
A lot of things going on, rock walls, and they got a lot of things to do there. But is this change, and I'm going to try to actually make myself clear so you can answer it. Are you responding to Gen Z, or is Gen Z part of a larger shift? Like, we didn't roll out this kind of red carpet for millennials or Gen X or boomers, did we? I mean, this is big, courting them this way.
Yeah, well, I personally, I actually think that it is a different perspective. I think that we do have, we are able to look at it differently because we're questioning a lot of things about the workplace, and really looking at workflows and looking at individual needs of different groups and being more responsive and insightful. So it gives us a moment in time when we can really do this a little bit easier than perhaps we could have done it in years past. But I don't know, Gretel, what you think, I mean, your talent group that you've put together is like, amazing, and I think very sensitive and insightful to different groups.
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution, right? I think Gen Z comes in with a strong voice, and exactly what you're saying, Kathy, they're passionate about diversity and their voices being heard and values and purpose driven. But this has been coming for a while, right? That companies, especially, I can give the perspective more from the tech companies that I've been working on comms team, different tech companies and their comms team and the cultures. It's been an evolution, right? That the companies have really embraced it, and that now it's primed, right, for Gen Z because we're ready for it, right? So I think it's been over the years. I did, so two things to share with this group. One is from a personal perspective, of course, we're working in tech, but as you mentioned, Kathy, I also was a co-founder of an organization, a community called Latinas in Tech. We started about 7 years ago with the simple goal of just connecting and elevating the voices of Latina women working in tech, which we are very few. And it was just a really nice way to connect. And now the organization has blossomed. We have more than 15,000 members. And it's just been a really wonderful way. But through those years, I saw the evolution through tech companies, especially from the outsider kind of view, because I work in tech, but from an outsider view as an organization that is working with tech companies. Initially, we would be like, oh, we want to have an event and we'll bring our own stuff. Now the companies are welcoming us and they all work, and it's accepted, and it's actually, you embrace these type of organizations in order to diversify your talents, right, and everything. And I think internally at companies, one of the things that have been really interesting in Expedia, for example, Expedia Group, just so we're clear, there's 3 brands. So we have ExpediaHotels.com and Vrbo are our 3 main brands. We're a global company, travel, there's a lot of employees. And one of the things that's really important in talking to Gen Z, there's a lot of amazing people on the team that I talked to this week about what's interesting to them is values and company culture, right? And that starts from the beginning, from when you're being recruited, to who you're interviewing with, to the team that you're on, to your retention and growing. As Josh was mentioning, it's really important, that growth path. So they really want to see that opportunity for growth, for their voices to be heard. Will I be able to grow? Is the leadership diverse as well? Are they walking the walk and not just talking the talk? Are they really making things happen and in a consistent basis? So I think all of those things, lead to now it is a place where Gen Z, their voices can be heard, and the path has been set, and there's still ways to go, but it's been exciting to see kind of the change and all these companies embracing different programs.
You talk about tech companies doing that, and tech's a relatively new industry. What are you hearing or seeing, or what are the challenges for older industries, the banking world, Wall Street, law firms, these things that have been institutions that have been around for a very, very long time? Are they adapting? Maybe Kathy, this is for you. Are you seeing those institutions adapting the way some of these younger industries are?
Well, I think we could take the sustainability and environmental area as one example. And I'm going to lean on Josh to comment on that after this, but, I think that, making statements early on about, commitments in terms of sustainability has been important for Gen Z. They really care about that. And, as do others too, but I mean, it's particularly important as a value, based company and authentic leadership. That's actually, like Gretel's saying, stepping up and kind of showing that you're actually delivering, what you're saying you're doing. And there's been a little bit of scrutiny, whether the companies are actually holding true to the promises they've made. And you've seen a couple of examples of SEC coming down recently in terms of the financial sector on some of the ESG funds and other commitments that have, kind of been stated, and whether they actually have the right metrics and whatever. But I was always really impressed very early on with what Nestle did in terms of, the packaging and the innovation, hub kind of approach, where you were really early on, even before, I think, Josh, if I'm speaking out of turn, but I remember that, even before anyone knew how you would make those commitments, like you stood up and made, and stated some goals that were tough to make, and then pursued, the path for how to get there. So I think that, again, I'll let you comment on that, but I think that some of the industries that are, again, not tech, some of the industries that have been around for a longer period of time were early in terms of trying to move forward. And again, none of this is easy. And as we get into a difficult economic environment, energy scarce environment, prices rising everywhere, I think it'll become even harder. And I think it'll be important to keep our eye on, like, how we navigate through that. But Josh, maybe you want to comment what really happened and how you guys really felt when you were tackling that very early on, actually.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's the same for ESG and sustainability commitments as it is for DE&I commitments, and I think it gets back to the heart of what we're talking about here, which is, if you take a look at, and I'm admittedly an elder millennial, so when you look at millennials, we think about them as kind of the me generation, a generation that really aspires to do a lot of things and always wanted to aspire. When you take a look at what Gen Z wants to do, aspiration is great, but they actually want to do it. They want action. And so what we've done, particularly with the ESG work, but also with DE&I, it's less about the commitment. The commitments are great. Consumers want to see commitments, but what they really want to see, what they really purchase on shelf, or what they really connect with as an employee, is action. And so we've pulled that through as much as we possibly can everywhere, showing the actions of what we're doing, from the products and packaging to the DE&I commitments that we're making.
And those, of course, are like commitments and values that go beyond what Gen Z wants, right? These are things that are good for the environment, good for business, good for the world, good for everybody. I'm looking at a little research that you sent me, Kathy, a survey, and it said there are 3 things that, in addition to remote work, that Gen Z wants. They'd like to see free meals in the office, casual dress code, games in the office, and team happy hours and events. That's not exactly the same as diversity and ESG, right? Like, how far do we go? Like, what is fair to ask your employer? I don't know. I mean, we all got jobs, and I didn't ask for games and free meals. It would have been nice, but how much wiggle room do we have to respond to them, and how much do they, I don't want to say have the right to ask for, but how far can we go? Still a workplace, right?
Yeah, well, but I think that people want a community, and they want a culture that's caring. I mean, we've seen that very much, empathy, connection. If they're going to come back to the office, it's not about doing your email sitting at your desk. And we all know that, it's really more about being creative together, collaborating together, getting support from each other, and building a sense of community. And that's what I love, Gretel, about your Latinos in tech, group that grew to 15,000 people, is that people get, help from each other, and I think that we have to really realize there is absolutely no right way. And, just like the journal was saying, it's utter chaos. It's going to be really back and forth and changing, and even the perks that you offer. I don't think that the Gen Z is coming back to have popcorn in the office. I think they want something much more deeper than that. Of course, they want to have fun, but it's really more, they want to have the mentorship. They want to, have the opportunities. And so it's up, all of us actually need to be thinking about how we can engage people in internal communications in a more meaningful way. And someone said to me, we opened our office, it was really great. And we said, okay, we promoted it and everything. And it's like, nobody came back. What do we do now? Or young people came back because they live in New York and they don't want to be in their apartment by themselves with their roommate because it's really a small space, and none of the senior people came back. So the mentorship opportunity was not that great. So we really need to figure this out. And that's why it's so great to have this kind of conversation, because we can learn from each other about what works. But basically, as we've all been saying, career opportunities to advance rock climbing, so to speak. Communities of mentorship, from groups which look like me, that Gretel set up, and being flexible. I mean, there was a great statistic on LinkedIn, which LinkedIn shared, which said that like Gen Z doesn't even answer a job opportunity if it doesn't have the word flexible in it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just, we don't know the answer to the question you're posing about how much, peanuts, popcorn, and ping pong we have to offer, but we do know that we're going to have to continue to listen in order to be able to really be, attractive to a Gen Z population.
And I think one of the things, maybe it's a positive from the pandemic, right? People are yearning that, community, exactly what we're talking about, Kathy, as we return back to the office, it is a fine line of figuring out how we come back. But I think at this point, those things that were so valuable before of that work culture, I don't know if it's that important anymore to Gen Z to have a ping pong table. We have it up here and people aren't really using it. We really just want to be together at this point. We want to plan together. We want to brainstorm together, how to go to happy hours together. I think it changed a little bit of that perspective too. Even talking with the team this week, it's really more valuable, the in-person planning sessions. We're a travel company, so we're making the effort to travel and have in-person planning sessions now that travel is back. So I think that's important. And one thing I did want to add that's I think important is also for companies to think about is employee resource groups, as they might be known. At Expedia Group, they're called inclusion business groups. So it's basically groups internally that are around Latino, African American, Asian American, around that you can be with your peers within. And I found that many of those groups, I've led them before for the Latino organizations within tech companies, most of the times are led by the Gen Z, right? It's them that have the voice and they feel empowered to really this is my culture, this is where I come from. I want to share it with others that have that similar background. I want to have a safe space to have my thoughts heard, but then it's also supported by leadership. That's really key, right? It's one thing to have it led by the organizations, but I think it's really important to have leaders involved consistently. That's key, right? Not just because we have, for example, executive sponsors for each of the group that participate and support each one, but it's important that they're active, right? And consistently listening and learning and not just showing up when there is just a meeting, but really being there and listening. I think those groups are really important within different organizations to really encourage that employee engagement, that feeling of belonging, of community, and especially right now that people are really yearning for that. And mentorship comes from that, right? Because there are people that are within, for example, the Latino community that I can feel I can mentor others, and I can find mentors within there. So it's just so valuable that I really encourage companies, if you don't have in places employee resource groups, to really encourage that within the company.
Speaking of mentoring, we have another statistic here. We have 66% of Gen Zers want in-person feedback from their managers, but 76% of employees prefer working from home most of the time. So there's two questions from this. A, how you reconcile that, and B, what does this mean for the people who are being the mentors? You're conceivably talking about older generations. Do they want to go back to work? What do they want to do? How do you reconcile everybody's desires and double-edged requests, I guess?
Yeah. So Josh, I don't know if you want to.
Sure. Yeah, I think, for us, the balance seems to change every single week, depending on what's going on. People are trying to figure it out for themselves. I think companies are trying to figure it out as well. And I think, some of the older generations should look at this as an opportunity. So we've built the muscle over the pandemic to do incredible things remotely. At the same time, prior to the pandemic, specifically at Nestlé, where we had more of an in-person culture, we were primed to do incredible things in person. And so now as we try to move past the remote part of the pandemic and into what is the new future of work, we're trying to really bridge the gap between in-person and remote. There's the power in person that employees know happens, It reduces the fatigue that comes in a remote only environment. It increases collaboration, it increases performance, it drives that great climate. At the same time, we also know employees really want that flexibility to be able to work from home where and when they need to. And so for us, all of our different operating companies have a little bit of a different model from a flexibility standpoint. Everything at Nestlé has to start with a Nest. So for us, it's Nest Flex. And for us, it really gives employees the opportunity to embrace the hybrid model the way it's truly intended. We don't have set days that people absolutely need to be in the office on a regular basis. People can flex as they need, as the team needs it, as the business needs it, as they themselves need it. And if we're, transparently, we're trying to find that right balance. But when we get it, we're seeing productivity go up. We're seeing climate and collaboration and culture scores go up. And it's bringing the best of both worlds together for us.
Yeah, and I think what we commented about with regard to an empathetic leadership style is in sync with what Josh is saying. So there is no one size fits all. And one thing we learned from the pandemic is mothers have particular needs. They've got kids at home, they've got schooling issues. They're caregivers who are taking care of older parents now, and they have special issues. So I think that you really have to keep your ear to the ground and be flexible, as Josh is just pointing out, because we're not going to be able to say our policy is X. That's not going to happen in today's environment. It's going to be a constantly changing. But in order to encourage older cohort to come back to work, this is a digital first generation, Gen Z, and the business models are all shifting. We're going to, people are going to have to get used to different ways of working, digitization that's really, accelerating, so they can learn something from Gen Z too. How many people have to ask for help when they're looking at their, social feeds? And now we see how TikTok has become, accessible to older people too. I love the story of the 90-year-old grandmother who was went viral on TikTok. So I think that we would only learn that from Gen Z, so, there's rationale for coming back and spending time with the different generations.
Absolutely. But there's also things, though, that the older generations then have to learn, right? There's going to be upskills training that they have to do, right? How are employers, keeping that segment of the workforce skilled and vibrant and all that, while the Gen Z is moving in and their sort of digital first native skills.
I think Josh hit it on the nail. It's still, we're all trying to figure it out, right? As we're all, most of the companies returning back to office, and it's a hybrid model. It's a new way of working, right? So we're all trying to figure it out. I think for us, at least at Expedia Group, it is exactly the same. We're very flexible in terms of the different teams. It's not mandatory a certain number of days. As a communications team, we are trying to come in at least 2 times a week and make sure that we, at least as a team, are on the same days and collaborating with other teams on those days, and you can come in as much as needed. So very flexible, but it is a kind of a new way of working. But I think we all are yearning. This Zoom fatigue is real, right? So I think it doesn't matter your generation. I think the in-person is valuable. So as leaders, you should encourage it and lead by example, and show up in the office and encourage others to come, build other team building activities as well, because I think that sense of community right now is really, really important. Besides getting the work done, is a very important time right now to connect with your teams and really, make sure that we're in this together. So it's an evolution, right? And we're trying to still figure it out, but it's a hybrid new way of working.
Right. And on that note, that's what I'm hearing. For our closer, this is a continual evolution. We don't know when it will stop evolving, right? This is ongoing every day, every year. It could be a change. Correct? Yep.
Absolutely. We have to create an open learning environment where we're all trying to figure out how we can every day just learn something a little bit different and do something a little bit, different from what we did yesterday.
Excellent. It's not easy, but it's excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. As predicted, this was a great conversation on this topic, and I appreciate all your insights, and we will continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the PRovoke Podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.